Looks like we have another author, Mr. Gomez. Oh, Mr. Santiago, were you here first?
Yeah, he signed up first.
You signed up first. Smart guy. 14, AB 757. Is that correct?
Correct. 757.
Okay.
Thank you, Chair and members. Today I'm presenting 757, which will authorize a medical assistant who meets specified criteria to perform a total protein refractometer test analysis in a licensed plasma collection facility in California.
Yes, we got a motion and a second.
And I have accepted the committee's amendments, and I ask for your aye vote.
Thank you very much. Witness in support.
Madam Chair, my name is John Valencia. I'm here representing Grifols Incorporated, the biotechnology company that sponsors this measure. With me this morning to answer any questions is Dr. Conrad Gorospe, who is the Chief Medical Officer for our network of plasma collection centers in California. There are 6 out of a national network of 153. In California, there are fewer than 20 facilities. This is the equipment that we've demonstrated in all of your offices, and this bill is to allow an entry-level employee to push one button for a fully automated, digitized readout. It's unique in California. It's not a requirement in the rest of the country. We ask your aye vote.
Thank you. Others in support? In opposition? Seeing none, questions from committee members? Yes. All right. Okay. Got to move quickly. Thank you.
We're in a hurry.
Go ahead, Bob.
Madam Chair and members, Bob Ackerman on behalf of the California Society of Pathologists. Pathologists are physicians who direct clinical laboratories and specialize in laboratory medicine. Our concern with the bill is not the specifics of this test, but the concept of what CLIA does and what state law does, which is basically categorize tests by complexity and then determine the appropriate personnel that can perform those tests. So this is a moderate complexity test, not a wave test. A wave test category is the lowest of the test categories and has minimal training and qualifications to do those. And our objection is to pulling tests out individually and violating that system of evaluation. We think the appropriate thing for the sponsors to do is to approach CMS and get waive status for this test, and that would allow them to use a medical assistant to perform those tests. So it's not the specifics of this test, it's the concept and the system of regulation we have for laboratory testing. Thank you.
Catherine Reese with PPA on representing the California Association for Medical Laboratory Technology. I've also been authorized by Barry Broad and Shane Guzman, who are stuck in other committees, who represent the engineers and scientists who are the unionized clinical laboratory scientists. We would echo what Mr. Ackerman has said. We would also add, too, that there has been a long history and proliferation of those various allied health professions or other professions that don't happen to like California law and don't like the CLIA model to come before this body on a case-by-case, individual-by-individual, device-by-device basis to try and seek an exemption from California law. And we would agree with Mr. Ackerman that they should be pursuing a test at the federal level to get it categorized as waived. The other dynamic that goes on in these plasma centers, as many of you may be aware, people who come to donate are those who are paid to donate. And we would be very concerned that even though this device appears to be very simple, there are issues potentially with calibration and readings. There are not proper definitions, in our opinion, in the bill with regard to supervision. Is it over the shoulder? Is it 10 feet away? Is it in the building? What do we mean by supervision? So for all of those reasons, we would respectfully oppose this measure. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else in opposition? Would the author like to respond to the issue raised on supervision?
Supervision is a common theme in multiple disciplines in the Business and Professions Code. I don't know of an instance in where on-site immediate supervision is required. We put the physician at the apex. Dr. Gorospe oversees a network of physicians throughout our facilities, as is the case in the other biologics licensed facilities, and we follow the requirements of the Department of Public Health.
Any other questions from committee members on this issue? I think that The one other question I had was, we talked about California, the law in California. Do other states have similar restrictions that you're seeking this exemption for, or in other states are lower qualified lab technicians able to press the red button?
Dr. Gorowski can speak to that.
We're under the auspices of the FDA, which in turn CLIA and COLA.
I can't hear you.
Oh, we're under the FDA regulations as well as CLIA and COLA, and their requirements, as the gentleman has said, for moderate complexity. We have fulfilled all the requirements, including training. I'm a lab person myself for the last 35 years, and I know when people are underqualified to do certain tests. This test is basically you press a button. It's all fully automated. Calibrations is in there, and basically, like I said, you push a button, you're done.
In other states.
Compared to back in the old days where you had to look at a light source, you put it in this tube, you have to make a judgment
No,
call.
I was asking about other states.
The specific answer to your question, Madam Chair, is that there's fewer than a handful of states that operate like California with separate license requirements for the management of moderate complexity tests. The overwhelming majority of states default to CLIA, federally imposed standards.
Okay, and you have a response
Yes,
to that?
I do, Madam Chair. Thank you very much. When California law with regard to clinical laboratory science has long been rigorous and has long held a unique standard. When CLIA was passed in the late 80s, it was done in the wake of all of the pap smear scares and errors. And the federal law did something, the federal government did something very unique in passing CLIA. It put in provisions that were very specific, that when state law was more stringent than federal law, state law prevailed. The CLIA standard was designed to be a floor, not a ceiling with regard to clinical laboratory science. And when these tests are categorized by the FDA and by by CLIA as waived moderate complexity or high complexity, it's done on the basis of what is the consequence if an error is made, not on necessarily what is the simplicity of pushing the button. So in this particular case, if the plasma if the donor is deemed to be eligible when perhaps they are not eligible, the consequences can be such that they are grave to the individual donor. So it is not necessarily the simplicity of the test, but rather the competency and qualification of the person having the critical judgment, being able to know whether the machine or the instrument or whatever it might be is deemed to be sufficiently non-threatening to the individual who's being tested.
Did you have a response to that?
We are required by the CLIA and COLA and the FDA to do assessments at the time of training, 6 months, 12 months, and yearly thereafter. And in that part of the training, to address her concerns, these processors are trained into how they collect a specimen, preparation of the donor, how to run the equipment by direct observations, how to handle quality control testing, how to do validation. And this is all part of our moderate complexity assignments that we're required by law to fulfill. And the FDA and COLA and CLIA comes in, and like clockwork, and they go through all our records, all our training, all our documents, and we get approved by every one of them all the time.
Thank you. We have a question, Mr. Bloom.
Thank you. Just reading through the staff report, the sponsor states that this test can be administered in 48 states by a trained healthcare professional. That's the equivalent of what we define as a medical assistant. So I'd like to ask the opposition if that's accurate, and if that's the case, is there any evidence that there's been a trend towards negative public health outcomes, and what the evidence is, if that's the case?
Mr. Bloom, I don't factually know. What I would go back to is to speak to the model, as Mr. Ackerman has pointed out on behalf of the pathologist, is the road going down for exemption by exemption, as opposed to looking aggregately at what the policy is one that has been long and historical here. I will promise you that should this bill be signed into law, we will have every allied health professional known to all of us coming in seeking exemptions to do individual lab tests without a lab director, much as this one is. And that is just in the waived category section. This is a moderate complexity test, which is a higher level test.
Thank you. All right. Do we have a motion on the bill yet? We have a motion and a second. This is due pass as amended to appropriations.
Bonilla.
Aye.
Bonilla, aye. Jones. Baker. Bloom. Bloom, aye. Burke. Chang. Dodd. Eggman. Eggman, aye. Gatto. Holden. Mullen. Mullen, aye. Ting. Ting, aye. Wilk.
Aye.
Wilk, aye. Wood. Wood, aye.
7-0, measures on call.
7-0, the measure's on call.
Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Members.
Thank you, Madam Chair
Mr. Santiago.
and members.
AB 1182. Item number 18. Secondhand goods, let's go.
Thank you, Madam Chair and members. I'd first like to accept the committee amendments and
Thank
thank
you.
the committee for working with my team. AB 1182 clarifies existing law on secondhand goods law in regards to tangible personal property as applied to resellers and antique dealers in California. It also provides law enforcement with meaningful data by which to curtail the dissemination of stolen property and facilitate the recovery of those items. Specifically, AB 1182 clarifies that tangible personal property applies to only to all serialized goods and anything additional that is included on the list maintained by DOG. Per the amendments here today, we've allowed for local law enforcement to add items to that list of monitored goods until the DOJ has a statewide list up, running, and provide guidance. Thank you very much for your time. The witnesses will introduce themselves, be brief, and we respectfully ask for an aye vote.
Thank you. First witness.
Good morning. I would like to begin by thanking Assemblymember Santiago for introducing this bill, and as well I extend my gratitude to this committee for allowing me to testify. My name is Alan Michon. I'm the owner of a full-service auction house as well as a promoter of an outdoor antique show which attracts over 900 vendors and in excess of 10,000 shoppers every month. I'm here today as a chairman of the California Association of Resellers, Reusers, and Buyers. Current business and professions codes require a fingerprint and photo ID to be obtained by anyone receiving secondhand goods. It requires all items received to be fully described and reported to law enforcement by the end of the next business day, regardless of value. This would include an old doorknob, a piece of clothing, or even a single marble. Everything. All merchandise as well must be held for 30 days prior to being offered for resale.
All right, we do have a motion and a second. Do we have others in support? State your name and organization.
Yes, Frank Solicitor, President of the California Association of Resellers, Reusers, and Buyers, and my background's in law enforcement since I was 22 years old. And the reason I was testifying was I believe this bill will help AB 391 be the tool that it should be for law enforcement, and without it, it won't be. So that's why I'm here.
Thank you. In support, just state your name and organization.
Good morning. My name is Marilyn Rose, and I own the Sacramento Antique Fair, which is a 300-vendor market here in Sacramento in Midtown, and I'm just here to in support of the bill.
Thank you.
Madam Chairman, my name is Alistair Dorward. I'm with Home Consignment Center. We're the largest furniture consignment business in California. We currently collect over $4 million worth of sales tax in our consignment business. The current code would be fatal to our business in that the 30-day hold period would force us to double the size of our showrooms and cost us further $6 million in expenses. We currently employ 250 people, a further 150 secondary employees, and we're also a sustainable business. Every month, 15,000 pieces of furniture that would otherwise go into landfill, we make a market and provide a recycling purpose. And so we're strongly in support of this bill and would ask the members to respect this. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good morning, Madam Chairman. My name is Don Roden. I'm an antique dealer for approximately 30 years in the state of California. I'm also a retired special agent with the California Department of Justice, Bureau of Narcotic Enforcement. And I'm here this morning to support the passage of this bill. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Opposition?
Madam Chair, members, Aaron McGuire on behalf of the California State Sheriff's Association. We're not formally opposed to this measure. I want to thank the author and his staff. We've been working closely trying to reach a resolution on this. We don't want to overly burden the secondhand dealers, folks. At the same time, we want to make sure that if property is stolen and is turned into one of these locations, that we can get those reports. We think the committee amendments help quite a bit. We have some questions about how that's going to work mechanically, but we're looking forward to working with the author on this. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Questions from the committee? I don't see any on this measure, and you are taking the amendments, which I do think try to make sure that everyone's intention is to make sure law enforcement has the information it needs, but we don't want an undue burden. And hopefully by having local lists available that law enforcement can use, and please continue to work with them on the details of how that would be most helpful for law enforcement purposes.
We will, Madam Chair. Thank you.
Thank you. We have a motion and a second. We'll take roll. Do pass to, as amended, to appropriations.
Bonilla.
Aye.
Bonilla, aye. Jones. Baker. Aye. Baker, aye. Bloom. Aye. Bloom, aye. Burke. Chang. Dodd. Eggman. Eggman, aye. Gatto. Holden. Mullen. Ting. Ting, aye. Wilk. Wood. Wood, aye.
6-0, the measure's on call. Thank you. Mr. Cooley, I believe you're next.
Good morning.
Welcome. We have
Good morning.
AB 266, item number 8 in your agenda.
Yes, ma'am. Good morning, Madam Chair and members. Today I present you AB 266 relating to medical marijuana business standards, the second bill of this character that you've had this morning. And of course the backdrop, as you heard earlier, that excellent recitation by Mr. Jones Sawyer, movement at the federal level has really heightened the importance of state setting some ground rules on medical marijuana. That does set the table for this bill. This reaches back to 1996 when California voters approved Proposition 215, the Compassionate Use Act, opening the door to the use of medical marijuana in California. But over the decades, limited work has been done to kind of set some boundaries on how it is delivered. So AB 266 seeks to establish a comprehensive system for medical marijuana oversight in California, from cultivation of dispensary. It does not touch individuals growing it for their own use under Proposition 215. They are exempt from licensure under this bill, as are primary caregivers growing for just 5 persons. So there are some cutouts for individual use. This is more when it starts morphing into a business enterprise of medical marijuana. The AB 266 establishes a dual licensing system between state and local governments. Business owners would be getting a background check from the Department of Justice, and then getting a conditional license from the state, and then they would turn to the local level for approval. And this is the way in which this bill seeks to balance the interests of local governments in medical marijuana. And this makes sense, I think. Medical marijuana dispensaries are important for the individuals involved, but they also have a bearing on local quality of life. Communities have an interest in this business as it arises in their midst. So AB 266 creates statewide guidelines for health and safety standards, preserving local control and enforcement of community standards. The bill also provides for cultivation standards and testing for pesticides, environmental mitigation, and it includes a fund for environmental mitigation, which is found on page 21 of the bill. A fund is set up to support environmental mitigation, which is a very vital issue in those communities affected by large-scale grows. Also, standards for edible medical marijuana products and packaging guidelines and quality control. And as the committee analysis states, California is the only state that permits medical marijuana in the absence of a robust statewide regulatory system. So there's definitely a hole in how we have dealt with this. A robust enforcement regulatory scheme is essential for California to bring the medical marijuana industry out from the underground economy and to ensure that patients can receive this medicinal product in a safe and legal way as intended by Prop 215. In a moment, I'm going to turn it to Tim Cromarty for the League of Cities. But I do want to speak just briefly on the principal difference that I think we as members will grapple with as hopefully my bill moves forward, as Mr. Bonta and Mr. Jones Sawyer bill moves forward, is this question of oversight. And I would submit that it's a question that we as members need to think about in terms of how the government works. I actually, whatever the situs of the agency, I think we in the legislature will feel we'll have greater success in the years ahead exerting oversight in this vital area if the principal elements are in a single state agency and not scattered among various agencies. I think a unified structure actually will strengthen the capacity of the legislature to engage in oversight. And so there's sort of an issue of philosophy here that I would just counsel members to think about. I do have some tax provisions in here, but I want to point out that in the medical marijuana area, I would say taxation questions are generally viewed as sort of quality of life issues. The presence of medical marijuana in the community does affect how people feel about the community. The only thing we do here is restate existing authority as affects counties to have taxes. There's not an attempt to leverage anyone to create new tax authorities. It affirms the right of voters to vote on it. But I would say affirming that tax right actually is an important piece of the regulatory structure and quality of life. So I just want to throw that out there. At this point, I have Mr. Sheehy also representing the California Police Chiefs Association, but I would turn to Mr. Cromarty for the League of Cities. Okay. Subject to your guidance, Madam Chair.
Yes, in support.
Have you testified? Okay. Madam Chair and members, Tim Cromarty on behalf of the League of California Cities, who are pleased to co-sponsor this measure with police chiefs. We appreciate the opportunity to work with your staff to improve the bill. AB 266 implements a framework for medical marijuana that unequivocally incorporates a component of local control and local enforcement. Too often we have seen legislation in this area that attempts to preempt local ordinances. We are convinced that any truly functional, lasting framework for the business model of distribution and regulation of marijuana must have a robust local control component. This will facilitate both responsive oversight and timely enforcement should problems arise in individual communities. Such a framework will also signal to the federal government that California is serious about establishing a robust regulatory and enforcement framework in which state and local governments are working together closely with local governments playing a prominent role. We're also convinced that a health-based regulatory structure will be necessary for medical marijuana regardless of whether marijuana is legalized in California due to what we know are the heightened needs and sensitivity of legitimate patients who take marijuana as part of their medicinal therapy. The complete lack of health and safety standards as well as testing standards must change if we are to resolve the public health hazard they pose. Thank you for your attention. I'll be glad to answer any questions.
Another witness in support?
If I may jump in just before my witness, I want to thank Uni Linden for her work on this. There are amendments that are proposed, and so I am accepting committee amendments, and I failed to state that at the outset, and thank you for your good work, Uni.
You're a mind reader.
Yeah.
Very good.
Good morning, Madam Chair. Tom Sheehy with Greenberg-Traurig, representing the California Police Chiefs Association. Appreciate a moment to testify on the bill. This bill, AB 266, is trying to strike a balance between community's ability to have control over what goes on in their community and patients' right to have the medical marijuana that has been recommended for them. Our bill, Mr. Cooley's bill, is a bill that we're sponsoring along with the League of Cities. It's fundamentally about three things. It's about advancing local control, protecting public safety, and creating uniform health and safety standards that will ensure lawful distribution of medical marijuana in those cities and counties where it's authorized. The measure carefully safeguards the rights of cities and counties to decide whether to regulate and how to regulate medical marijuana cultivation and distribution. The measure achieves these goals by doing three things. It ensures that cities have the control of regulating local medical marijuana facilities by providing that the state will issue a conditional license only, and local government will issue the actual license to operate those facilities based upon local priorities. It'll protect public safety with uniform safety requirements. It'll protect public health with uniform health and safety standards. Ensuring patient safety with a quality assurance protocol requiring random sample testing by certified laboratories for all medical marijuana sold in California. Since Prop 215's passage, we haven't had any regulatory structure put in place, and there has been chaos in the marketplace, piecemeal legislation, and there's been a tremendous amount of litigation that has surrounded the medical marijuana area. None of this has served our communities well, and it certainly hasn't served the patients well that are consuming medical marijuana. This measure provides a much-needed, long-overdue framework to effectively implement Prop 215, which is why we're supporting it. This measure is not an endorsement to legalize marijuana, okay? It is an attempt to put a rational regulatory structure in place for medical marijuana that is consistent with the needs of cities and law enforcement, and prior to the appearance of a legalization initiative itself in 2016, which we expect is coming. For all of those reasons, Madam Chair, we would respectfully request you and your committee members to vote aye on this measure today. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Others in support, name and organization.
Madam Chair, members, David Jones, on behalf of the City of Sacramento, thank the author and the sponsors for their hard work on this bill. We'd ask for an aye vote.
Thank you.
Christy Weiss in support on behalf of the California State Law Enforcement Association.
Thank you. My name's Karen Leggett. I'm from Marysville, Yuba City area, and we had a homicide last night because of this issue. Yeah. He has the article. I brought it with me. And our area is not safe. Our children are not safe. I would like to go and have more enforcement because our so-called medical patients are selling their pot in our area. They're driving Lexuses.
Thank you. We've already had our testimony. Thank you so much for your support.
Madam Chair, members of the committee, Paul Gonzalez representing the cities of Concord, Chino Hills, Torrance, Indian Wells, and Rancho Cucamonga in support.
Thank you.
Madam Chair and members, Lauren De Valencia representing the American Planning Association in support.
Good morning. My name is Don Duncan. I'm the California Director of Americans for Safe Access. And while we've not taken a position, I hope you'll move the bill today so we can keep doing this important work. Thank you.
Madam Chair and members, Mel Asseguy for the City of Compton. We want to thank the author and the sponsor for the work they've done on this bill. We think it's moving in the right direction. We don't have a position today, but we appreciate the protection of local control in the text and the spirit of the bill. Thank you very much.
Hello, I'm Shelby Lucero. I'm an advocate for patients' rights here in Sacramento, California, and I'm here in support. It's a work in progress. I want to thank the Cal Chiefs and the League of Cities for their willingness to work with the California cannabis industry.
Thank you very much.
Madam Chair, members of the committee, John Lovell on behalf of the Los Angeles Police Protective League, the Association for LA County Deputy Sheriffs, the Riverside Sheriffs Association, the California California College and University Police Chiefs Association, and the Code Enforcement Officers of California, all in support. Good bill. We commend the sponsors.
Thank you. Next.
Good morning, Viviana Becerra on behalf of the Sacramento Applied Business Dynamics and strong support.
Thank you.
Good morning, Roxanne Gould, American Nurses Association of California in support.
Madam Chair, members, Paul Smith with rural counties again. I think we're going to be the first that are not necessarily in support, but I think we do want to note on record. We do, again, have a concerns bill like the Mr. Bonta Jones-Sawyer bill. I will say there are a number of amendments that have been taken to address rural counties and county concerns collectively. We appreciate and thank you for that. There are, again, some others that still need to be in there for us to feel comfortable. I will note you're going to spend a little bit of time on the issue of dual enforcement. That is an issue that's very sensitive to counties. I think the league and the cities and the counties have a slightly different view of that. We've made a commitment to work with the league to work through that, although it's a big leap for us, and we're going to obviously be very interested in see how that plays out. But I want to state that for the record.
Thank you.
Good morning, Madam Chair, members of the committee. Karen Keene on behalf of the California State Association of Counties. We also don't have a formal position on the bill, but we've been working very closely with the author and sponsors, and we're going to continue that dialogue. Thank you.
Holly Fermini on behalf of the United Food and Commercial Workers Union in support.